Hello designers, in today's tutorial we're going to be creating a monogram on Illustrator. We're going to create a three-dimensional monogram. A monogram is a decorative design using your two initials. Think of it like a personal little logo. But we're going to be playing around with some effects here in Illustrator that are going to make it three-dimensional. So let's get started. We're going to select New File. We're going to select the Print presets. And you guys will notice that by default, the measurement unit in print is set to points. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set it to inches. And I'm going to select 10 inches by 10 inches. So it's going to be like a perfect square. And I'm going to call this monogram. Then I'm going to click create. I want to make sure my monogram is really symmetrical. So I'm going to enable my rulers by going to View, Rulers, Show Rulers. And then, just like we learned in Adobe Photoshop, I'm going to click on the rulers and I'm going to drag a ruler at about 5 inches. I'm going to drag a guide, by clicking on the ruler and placing it at 5 inches vertically. I'm going to drag another guide and place it at 5 inches horizontally. As a reminder, the guides will never show when you export your final draft. The guides are there just to assist you in creating a really symmetrical design. I want to create a monogram in the shape of a heart. Now you guys can select any shape that you want to for your own monogram. To create my heart, I'm actually going to start out with a rectangle. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and round out the rectangle completely to turn it into an oval. I'm tilting it slightly because this is going to be like one side of the heart. I'm actually going to go and give it a stroke of 1 point just so that I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm actually going to go and duplicate it. To duplicate it, I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and I'm going to select Reflect. And what this does is it makes a direct reflection of my previous rectangle. So when I click Copy, I now have two. I'm actually going to go and distance them a little bit to make my heart a little bit more dramatic. And having done that, I can now select both of these rectangles. I'm dragging a marquee over both with my selection tool so that I know they're both selected. And then I can go and use my good old Shape Builder tool, tool number 10. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to go and drag over the main parts of the heart to combine these shapes. And these, I'm going to hold down Alt on my keyboard so I can subtract. And that makes a pretty decent heart. Not the best heart in the world, but pretty dang decent. So I'm going to go and just enlarge it a little further. I like that it's not a perfect heart because I am not a perfect person. So the heart reflects me. What I'm actually going to do is round it out a little more. So using my direct selection tool, I'm just using the widgets here to make the heart a little bit rounder on the edges. Make it look more like a balloon. You guys can always go and distort the shapes by going and clicking on the anchor points, like so, dragging on the handles and messing around with the illustration a little further. But right now, I'm going to leave it like a simple heart. So next, I'm going to go and create my actual monogram. To create the monogram part, I need to use my Type tool. And I'm just going to go click to create a text layer. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see what I'm doing. And a monogram just uses your initials. So I'm going to type in my initials. You guys can use it in all caps, lowercase. I'm going to do all lowercase for this instance. And I'm going to look for a decorative font on my computer. So if you guys have not installed any fonts, I recommend you guys check out thefont.com. There's a lot of interesting fonts here for you guys to take advantage of. I am going to be using this font called Cathan because I really like how bubbly and how decorative it is. So I already installed the font Cathan to my computer, and now I need to make it a little bit bigger. So the default size that it goes to is 72 points, which is basically an inch. Obviously I need it to be a lot bigger, so I'm going to type in 300 and see how big that gets it. And then I'm going to go and kind of figure out a good placement for it. I don't recommend using the handles on the bounding box to resize text because that sometimes will distort it. So if you guys want to do it that way, hold down shift and drag, but honestly I recommend just kind of like resizing using the character panel in your properties because it's going to look a little bit less distorted when you do. Right now you guys can see that the text is set to black. The color, quite frankly, does not matter because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be converting this text into a shape so that the black won't matter at all. What will matter is the color of the actual heart and the stroke of the heart. So real quick, I'm just going to go and fill it with a color. I can always change my mind later. I'm actually going to go and maybe fill it with a subtle gradient. As you guys know, I'm kind of a gradient freak. Okay, I can always change the colors later if I change my mind. But what I gotta do now is I gotta select this text layer. So you can see that only the text layer is selected, not the heart. And I'm gonna convert this into a shape so that I can cut into the heart. So I'm selecting the text layer. I'm going to the object menu. No, sorry, not the object menu. I'm going to the type menu at the top of my workspace. And I am selecting the option that says create outlines. So that now that I created outlines, you guys will see all those typographic settings are gone. Like I can't change the font. I can't really do any editing to the text. So before you guys create outlines, I suggest you guys select the right font and set it to the right size because you won't be able to do any more typographic settings after that. But now when I select both of these shapes, and I use my direct selection tool, my shape builder tool, so that I can go and cut into them. I can basically edit the text same as I would a shape like a circle, triangle, and so forth. And if you guys will notice, I can basically go and move this heart anywhere and the text goes with it. I can see that I kind of miss this little part, so I'll go and actually delete it because I don't want to deal with it, honestly. But you can see how it's basically just one graphic now. So pretty cool. I'm actually going to go and get rid of these guides and clear guides. I don't really need them anymore and they're kind of getting on my nerves. And now I'm going to play around with some three-dimensional effects. So I'm selecting my monogram on my artboard. And then under the appearance in my properties panel, you guys will notice that there's FX. FX, as you guys will remember, is effects from our time in Photoshop. So I'm going to click on FX. And I have two sections of effects. The first one is Illustrator effects that are particular to Illustrator only. Underneath, the Photoshop effects are basically like the same filters you guys were familiar with using within Illustrator. Right now, though, I'm only going to be using one called 3D and Materials. So I'm going to select 3D and Materials, and I'm going to select Extrude and Bevel. And what this does is it helps me to create a three-dimensional graphic out of my illustration. You guys can see that it was using the blue gradient that I had applied for the stroke, and that's going to be the three-dimensional aspect that it's extruding. I can always select a bigger depth. You guys can see I'm making the heart look like thicker. I'm going to leave it, I think, at about 300 points. You guys can, of course, adjust it to, your own specifications. You can twist it. So, probably a bad idea. I'll probably leave that at 0. You can go rotate it. So you can see that I'm just rotating it on the x-axis, rotate it on the y-axis, rotate it on the z-axis. I actually like it on the side. I don't know. Might have to think about that. Alright dudes, so I like the way that I rotated it and twisted it around, and I like the extrusion. It looks kind of abstract, but you can still tell there's like letter forms there, so I'm going to play around with the different material options. What this does is it gives it like a texture. So the default has a very smooth finish, but you can always go in and select slightly more rough textures for your monogram. So you can see this one called Circle Stitch makes it look like it's made out of like fabric. You can see this one called Canopy makes it look like it's steel. So there's several very interesting textures that you guys can select from. This one looks really, really cool. This one called Marble Paint. So I might leave that for my final. So I recommend you guys kind of go and check out some of those different textures. This reminds me of a project I used to do a long, long time ago with my students on Photoshop when these same different filters were available. I also really love this one. Makes it look like a wooden piece. So honestly, I think I'm going to leave it because it kind of looks like it's carved in wood. And then if you guys click on the option that says lighting, you guys can kind of adjust how much light you're casting and create like stronger shadows on your monogram. So you can make it look really dramatic or slightly more subtle. You can also change the color of your light. So let's say I wanted a harsh red light or something. You know, you can go and adjust the intensity of that. Honestly, I don't like the actual light, so I'm going to leave it at white as a default because I do like the color of the wood. I think that looks really, really cool, and I'm actually going to lower the intensity of it a little bit. Once you guys are done messing around with it, you can X out and see how your monogram looks like so far. So I gotta say, that looks pretty wicked. So I am ready to export my final draft. I actually want just the monogram to show against a transparent background. So I'm gonna export this as a raster file in PNG format. I'm gonna go to File, Export. I'm gonna select Export As. I'm going to go and save it to my desktop, make it a little bit more noticeable. I'm going to call this Final 3D Monogram. And under Format, I'm going to make sure that it says PNG. Use artboards. I'm going to click Export. I want to make sure that the color says transparent, so you should see that little checkerboard background behind your graphic. And I'm actually going to select a resolution of high, so 300 ppi, so that when I print this, it's going to look its best printed on a sheet of paper. Then I'm going to click OK. That's what my final monogram looks like. And how cool does that look? It looks like I carved into a piece of wood or something to make it. So really happy with it. Can't wait to see your own monograms. Hit me up if you guys have any questions. So peace out.